Have you ever wondered what happens to our desires and intimate connections as we age? Society often portrays aging as a time of decline, quietly sweeping topics like sexuality under the rug. But in reality, intimacy and self-discovery don't expire with age, they evolve, becoming a profound source of connection, comfort, and personal growth. For many older adults, sexuality remains a vibrant part of life, one that defies societal norms and celebrates individuality. This journey isn't without its challenges. Cultural taboos, internalized shame, and a lack of open conversation make it difficult for many to embrace this vital aspect of themselves. Yet the benefits of doing so are undeniable. Improved mental health, better sleep, reduced anxiety, and a renewed sense of self-worth. In the stories of those who have navigated these waters, we find courage, wisdom, and a reminder that pleasure is a timeless human right. In this video, we'll delve into the real-life experiences of two remarkable individuals, Donna Esperanza and Don Anselmo, whose journeys illustrate the beauty of accepting and nurturing one's desires at any age. Through their struggles and triumphs, you'll discover why intimacy matters, and how embracing your sexuality can transform your later years into some of the most fulfilling of your life. If you haven't joined our community yet, I invite you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you're always up to date with our latest content. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's discussion. If you find this content helpful, drop a 1 in the comments below. If it doesn't quite resonate with you, leave a 0. Your feedback is invaluable. It helps me craft videos that better suit your interests and needs. Now, let's dive right in. Donna Esperanza was 70 years old when she found herself enveloped in a deep and unfamiliar solitude. Her children had long moved on to build their own lives, and her grandchildren, once the light of her bustling home, were now blossoming into adulthood. The once lively house filled with laughter and endless activity had become an echoing sanctuary of quiet reflection. The silence, though initially soothing, began to weigh heavily on her, bringing with it a sense of isolation she had never known before. Her days were spent in contemplation, revisiting memories of her younger self. The photographs on the mantelpiece captured a vivacious woman, radiant with life, and unburdened by the years that had now etched their stories into her skin. Each wrinkle, once a badge of her resilience, began to feel like a glaring reminder of her age. Donna felt estranged from her body, a body that had changed in ways she struggled to accept. The smoothness of youth had been replaced by lines and folds, and the energy she once took for granted had waned. With these changes came an unspoken question. Could a woman her age still feel desire? Did she even have the right to? These questions, however deeply personal, weren't entirely her own. Society had long dictated that sexuality belonged to the young, a fleeting gift tied to physical beauty and vitality. This pervasive belief lingered in Donna's mind, feeding a growing sense of shame whenever she found herself yearning for connection or intimacy. The very idea seemed forbidden, as though her age had revoked the natural human inclination for closeness. The turning point came one unassuming afternoon when Donna caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't just a collection of age-worn features. She was a survivor, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who had lived and loved deeply. In that moment, Donna realized she owed it to herself to explore the desires that hadn't faded, no matter how much she tried to suppress them. But this journey of acceptance would require courage and a willingness to confront the deeply rooted shame that had taken hold of her thoughts. Donna's solitude became an opportunity for introspection, a time to reconnect with herself and the emotions she had long buried. Yet, the road was not without its hurdles. The whispers of self-doubt were persistent companions, as were the societal judgments she had internalized over the years. How could she, a grandmother in her 70s, openly acknowledge her desires without fear of ridicule or rejection? The fear was tangible, yet beneath it lay a burgeoning sense of hope. A hope that she could reclaim the part of herself she had been conditioned to ignore. This journey wasn't about defiance or rebellion. For Donna, it was about healing, learning to embrace her body as it was, not as it used to be. It was about giving herself permission to feel alive in ways that transcended the boundaries of age. And while she didn't yet know where this path would lead, she recognized that the first step was acknowledging her worthiness to walk it. With the stage set, Dona Esperanza's story becomes one of courage and transformation. Her journey toward self-discovery unfolds with moments of vulnerability and resilience, offering a window into how she redefined intimacy and learned to embrace her desires. In the early days of her journey, Dona Esperanza found herself grappling with a deeply ingrained sense of shame. The very thought of acknowledging her sexual desires felt like an act of defiance against everything she had been taught to believe. Women her age, she thought, were expected to embrace their roles as caregivers, grandmothers, or companions, not as individuals with needs and desires of their own. These unspoken rules weighed heavily on her, and she found herself questioning whether she had the right to feel the way she did. It was as though the world around her had imposed an expiration date on her sense of intimacy, leaving her adrift in a sea of doubt. But Dona was no stranger to resilience. After weeks of silent struggle, she decided to take a bold step. She scheduled an appointment with her family doctor, a compassionate woman who had seen her through many of life's challenges. With cheeks flushed and a trembling voice, Dona broached the topic that had been haunting her. To her surprise, her doctor greeted her concerns with understanding and warmth, assuring her that sexuality was a natural and enduring part of the human experience. The words lingered in Dona's mind. Sexuality doesn't have an expiration date. It evolves, but it never truly disappears. Armed with this newfound perspective, Dona began to explore what intimacy meant to her in this stage of life. She realized that her desires were not just about physical pleasure, they were deeply tied to her need for connection, self-care, and acceptance. Slowly, she embarked on a journey of self-discovery, choosing to embrace her body in its current form, rather than yearning for the one she remembered from decades past. For Dona, this was an act of reclamation, a way to honor her body's capacity to feel and experience joy. The first step on this path was allowing herself moments of quiet intimacy. Dona began to see masturbation not as a source of shame, but as a form of self-care. These moments became sacred, time set aside to reconnect with her emotions, her physical self, and the memories of a life richly lived. At first, the process was awkward, clouded by the lingering whispers of societal judgment. Yet, with each attempt, she found herself becoming more comfortable, more attuned to her body, and more accepting of its changes. As Dona embraced this new aspect of her life, she began to notice subtle yet profound changes. The anxiety that had so often accompanied her quiet evenings started to fade. She found herself sleeping more soundly, her nights no longer haunted by restless thoughts. Even more striking was the transformation in how she viewed her own reflection. The wrinkles and lines on her skin, once sources of discontent, became symbols of resilience and a life well lived. She no longer looked at her aging body with disdain, but with a sense of gratitude and reverence. Dona's journey taught her that sexuality in later life is not merely a matter of physical need, but a deeply spiritual and emotional experience. It became a way for her to reconnect with herself, to validate her desires, and to celebrate her individuality. She learned that embracing her sexuality was not a rejection of societal norms, but a declaration of self-worth. Her story stands as a powerful reminder that pleasure, connection, and self-acceptance are not bound by age. As Dona's inspiring journey shows us the transformative power of self-compassion, we turn next to the life of Don Anselmo, a widower who also discovered the healing potential of embracing his own needs and desires. His story offers another layer to our understanding of intimacy in later life. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. At the age of 75, Don Anselmo found himself navigating the depths of loneliness, a companion he had not anticipated in his twilight years. After the passing of his beloved wife, the woman who had shared his joys, struggles, and countless memories, his world felt unmoored. The once vibrant home they had built together now echoed with silence. The laughter and conversations that once filled its rooms reduced to faint memories. Each corner of the house bore the imprint of her presence, from the flowers she lovingly arranged on the dining table to the faint scent of her favorite perfume lingering in their shared bedroom. Mornings were the hardest. The sun's golden rays streaming through the kitchen window used to signal the start of a new day, a moment they would share over coffee and light-hearted banter. Now Don Anselmo sat alone, his steaming cup of coffee a stark reminder of her absence. He tried to immerse himself in routine, tending to the garden, feeding the birds that visited his patio, but even these familiar activities seemed hollow without her by his side. The emptiness of the house mirrored the ache in his heart, and the weight of solitude became an almost unbearable burden. Despite the passage of time, the memories they had created together remained vivid. He often found himself lost in thought, recalling her laugh that could light up a room, the warmth of her hand in his, and the quiet moments of connection they shared during their years together. These memories, though precious, also underscored his current reality. The once bustling home that had been their sanctuary was now a quiet, somber space, its stillness punctuated only by the ticking of the clock and the occasional chirping of birds outside. Yet, within this solitude, Don Anselmo began to notice something stirring deep within him, a longing not just for companionship, but for a connection with himself. His wife's absence had created a void that he could not fill with external distractions. He realized that the grief he carried was not just about losing her, but also about losing a part of himself in the process. As he reflected on this, he began to wonder if the same tenderness and care he had once given her could be turned inward. So a way of honoring her memory by nurturing his own well-being. The loneliness pushed him to confront emotions he had long suppressed, emotions that ranged from sorrow to an unspoken need for intimacy. At first, this realization unsettled him. He questioned whether it was appropriate to feel such desires at his age, whether society would see him as selfish or foolish. But the more he sat with these feelings, the more he understood that they were not shameful but deeply human. They were a reminder of his capacity to love, to feel, and to connect, even in the face of profound loss. Don Anselmo's home, though quiet, became a space for introspection. He began to see its stillness not as a reminder of absence, but as an opportunity to rediscover himself. The walls that once echoed with shared laughter now held the potential for personal growth and healing. His journey toward self-compassion was beginning, though he did not yet know where it would lead. As Don Anselmo began to explore the depths of his emotions, his journey took a transformative turn. Next, we will uncover how he embraced his desires and found a path to healing, turning grief into a powerful act of self-discovery. Don Anselmo's initial steps on the path of self-discovery were laden with hesitation and doubt. The grief of losing his wife was accompanied by an unexpected resurgence of emotions he hadn't anticipated, desires he thought had been left behind with his youth. These feelings felt foreign and unsettling, as if they didn't belong to a man his age. For days he wrestled with an overwhelming sense of shame, questioning the legitimacy of his wants. Society had long dictated that older adults were meant to set aside their passions, and this unspoken rule weighed heavily on him. The internal conflict deepened as he grappled with his cultural conditioning. He had been raised to believe that sexuality was tied to youth, vigor, and partnership. Now, as a widower in his 70s, he found himself standing at the crossroads of his innate needs and the societal expectations that whispered in his ear. Was it selfish to still yearn for connection? Was it inappropriate to seek intimacy with himself as his only partner? These questions churned in his mind, leaving him unsure of how to reconcile his desires with the man he had always thought he should be. One pivotal evening, as he sat alone in his quiet home, Don Anselmo made a decision. He realized that the shame he carried served no purpose other than to hold him back from the healing he desperately needed. For too long, he had allowed grief and societal judgment to define his identity. If he was to truly move forward, he needed to face his feelings head-on. Tentatively, he began to explore his desires, not with indulgence, but with curiosity and care. He approached his body not as a source of shame, but as a vessel of life that had carried him through decades of joy, sorrow, and growth. As Don Anselmo leaned into this journey, he discovered moments of profound peace. What began as a timid exploration of his physical self evolved into a deeply spiritual act of self-care. These quiet moments became an opportunity for reflection, allowing him to reconnect with parts of himself he had long neglected. For the first time in years, he felt an inkling of liberation, a release from the constraints that had kept him tethered to doubt and insecurity. He began to view intimacy with himself as an act of love, a way to honor his body and its enduring capacity for joy. The benefits of this newfound acceptance soon became apparent. The nights that had once been sleepless and restless were now peaceful, as his anxiety melted away. His mind, no longer preoccupied with shame, allowed him to drift into restful slumber. He awoke feeling more energized and centered, his days taking on a lighter tone. The subtle changes in his mood and energy reminded him of the vitality that still lingered within him, waiting to be rediscovered. Perhaps the most significant transformation was in how Don Anselmo viewed his own reflection. Where he once saw only the marks of age and loss, he now saw the evidence of a life well lived. The lines on his face became stories, the creases on his hands became symbols of his perseverance. His body, no longer a source of discomfort, became a testament to his resilience. This shift in perspective filled him with a quiet pride, a gratitude for the years he had weathered and the man he had become. Don Anselmo's journey was not just about reclaiming his sexuality, it was about reclaiming himself. It was an act of defiance against the narratives that had told him to shrink and disappear. It was a celebration of his humanity, a reminder that intimacy, connection, and self-compassion have no expiration date. As Don Anselmo's journey shows, the courage to embrace oneself can lead to profound healing and growth. Next, we'll weave together the stories of Dona Esperanza and Don Anselmo to explore the universal lessons they teach us about aging, intimacy, and the enduring power of self-acceptance. The stories of Dona Esperanza and Don Anselmo echo a profound truth. Sexuality is not bound by age. It is a dynamic, evolving aspect of human life that transcends physical appearances and societal expectations. Their journeys remind us that intimacy, whether shared with another or cultivated within oneself, is a fundamental part of our identity. It is an enduring connection to our humanity, capable of bringing healing, joy, and self-awareness, even in the later stages of life. For Dona, the realization that her desires were valid and natural marked the beginning of her transformation. She overcame the shame imposed by cultural narratives that told her to suppress this part of herself. By taking the brave step of embracing her body, she found not only physical benefits like improved sleep and reduced anxiety, but also a renewed sense of self-worth. Her journey was not just about reclaiming her sexuality, it was about reclaiming her identity. Similarly, Don Anselmo's path was one of quiet courage. His willingness to confront deeply ingrained doubts and societal expectations allowed him to rediscover a connection to himself that had been lost in the wake of his grief. For both, intimacy became a form of self-compassion, a way to honor their experiences and affirm their right to joy and fulfillment. The lessons from these stories challenge the outdated and often unspoken belief that sexuality is exclusive to youth. Cultural norms have long perpetuated the idea that as we age, we must trade passion for propriety, intimacy for indifference. These narratives not only rob older adults of the opportunity to fully embrace their lives, but also reinforce harmful stigmas that breed isolation and shame. It is time to dismantle these stereotypes and foster an open dialogue about aging and intimacy. Conversations around sexuality in later life must move away from the lens of taboo and into a space of understanding and celebration. When we normalize discussions about the needs and desires of older adults, we empower them to advocate for their well-being without fear of judgment. Moreover, breaking free from these societal constraints creates an environment where aging is seen not as a diminishment, but as an opportunity for growth, self-discovery, and deeper connections. To redefine our cultural perspective on aging and sexuality, we must also challenge the narrow definitions of beauty and worth that dominate media and society. Bodies change with time, but their capacity to feel, connect, and express love remains. Celebrating these truths helps dismantle the ageist narratives that confine intimacy to the realms of youth. At the heart of both stories lies the essential lesson of self-acceptance. For Dona, embracing her desires was an act of self-care, a declaration that she was worthy of love and connection, both from herself and others. Don Anselmo's journey mirrored this realization, as he came to view his body not as a source of shame, but as a testament to a life richly lived. Their stories reveal that self-acceptance is not a passive act. It is a deliberate choice to prioritize one's needs, honor one's experiences, and nurture one's sense of self. Self-care takes many forms. For some, it might mean creating moments of quiet reflection to reconnect with their emotions. For others, it could involve exploring physical intimacy in ways that bring joy and comfort. The common thread is an intentional focus on personal well-being, a commitment to tending to one's physical, emotional, and mental health. This self-compassion is especially critical in combating the isolation that often accompanies aging. When older adults are encouraged to prioritize their needs and validate their desires, they gain the confidence to seek connections and embrace opportunities for intimacy. These acts of care ripple outward, improving not just individual well-being, but also relationships with loved ones and the broader community. Donna and Don Anselmo's journeys invite us all to reflect on our own relationships with intimacy, aging, and self-worth. Whether you are in the prime of youth or the golden years of life, their stories hold universal lessons about the importance of embracing oneself fully. Take a moment to consider what beliefs about aging and intimacy have shaped your perspective. How might those beliefs be limiting your capacity for connection and joy? We encourage you to use these stories as a starting point for deeper conversations with yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your questions. By opening up these dialogues, we can collectively work toward a world where intimacy at any age is celebrated, not stigmatized. If this article has resonated with you, let it serve as an invitation to take action. Share it with someone who might benefit from its message. Reflect on how you can incorporate self-care and self-acceptance into your daily life. Explore ways to challenge the narratives that no longer serve you or those around you. And most importantly, remember that the capacity for intimacy, connection, and growth is a gift that endures across all stages of life. The stories of Donna Esperanza and Don Anselmo are not just tales of individual courage. They are blueprints for reclaiming the richness of life at any age. They remind us that intimacy is not merely about physical connection, but about the profound ways we relate to ourselves and the world around us. It is about finding beauty in our own reflection, embracing the lines and curves that tell our story, and giving ourselves permission to feel deeply and authentically. As you carry these lessons forward, remember that the act of embracing one's desires is a celebration of life itself. Let these stories inspire you to look at yourself with compassion, to approach your relationships with openness, and to live with the conviction that joy and fulfillment are not bound by time. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might benefit from this topic. Have any thoughts or personal experiences to share? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community for more empowering content. Thank you for watching, and until next time, embrace the journey with confidence.